With the World Series coming to a close, I'd just like to extend my congratulations to the Yankees from New York, USA, and the Dodgers from Los Angeles, USA. How is it a World Series if all the teams come from the same country, by the way? By all accounts, it looks like everyone had a lovely time. Here's a good old-fashioned ranking list, worst to best, of every baseball game on the original Game Boy. And there were a lot of them. Too many, you might say. 11 games in a row might seem like too many for one console, but then baseball do be a bit like that, don't it? 11. Baseball. This launch title really does not come up to snuff at all, neither when compared to other launch titles or later baseball games. The batting is alright, but I've never before seen such a slow flight of a ball in a game before. You might think this would help you catch batters out, but to compensate for the lethargic pace, your fielders move equally slowly. This channel has necessitated I come back to this game several times now, and each time I do, I attempt to give it another shot. It's just really rubbish, which is unusual for a Nintendo published game. Baseball might have its small fan base somewhere, but they're incorrect and possibly a little mental. Moving on. 10. Pocket Stadium. Oh, how I wish this was Pokémon Stadium, but unfortunately not. This 1990 Japanese exclusive takes the unusual tact of turning the reaction time-based model of your normal baseball game and replacing it with an entirely random guessing game where you don't even get to swing the bat yourself. Your only input is reading stats and taking a stab in the dark at where the pitcher's going to throw the ball. When pitching yourself, it's the same, but reversed. If trying to outguess an inherently crooked AI sounds like a miserable time to you, you'd be correct in that assumption. And I don't want to belabor the point, but this reinforces just how bad Nintendo's baseball is. It's worse than a game that isn't even baseball. 9. Bo Jackson Hit and Run. There were two games on this cartridge, both featuring Tecmo Bowl cheat code Bo Jackson. The football one is kind of a train wreck, but the baseball game at least strays into the average. Pitching options are quite varied here, and you can make your fielders dive to attempt catches, so the game's at least operable. I can't help but feel that the inclusion of the football game on the same cartridge hurt the baseball one a bit. Having two games that were neither of them as good as they should have been instead of one that is false economy, unfortunately. 8. Higashio Osamu Kanshu Pro Yaku Stadium 91 and 92. As denoted by the word Kanshu in the title, this pair of games are actually more baseball management focused than simply playing. It's definitely got more of a simulation emphasis than a casual sports video game probably should have, and as a result there are too many options to consider and the game is just too difficult. There's this same element of guessing that we saw with the other JP exclusive on this list so far. It's not quite as obnoxious here, you only have to choose high, mid or low, but even so it's not something I really want to see in one of these. One for die-hard fans of the sport, I suppose. Also, both 91 and 92 can be counted here as this same entry because, aside from a few roster tweaks, the game is the exact same. 7. Roger Clemens MVP Baseball. This one's going to come up on the Monday series on the channel fairly soon. Roger Clemens, as I absolutely definitely knew before writing the review, is one of the most dominant pitchers in MLB history, an 11-time All-Star and 2-time World Series winner. The overall look of this game is pretty impressive, it must be said, although the gameplay is on the tough side. Fielding is made incredibly difficult by the breaking of the 180-degree rule. Any freshman film school student will tell you that in cinema, you never, under any circumstances, swing the aspect of the camera a complete 180 around, as it's too disorienting for an audience trying to make sense of where people are in relation to each other. Before each play, your camera is behind the batter, with the first base off to the right. As soon as the ball's been struck, the camera now looks at the action from the reverse angle, with first off to the left. You just try getting your head around that with only a second or two to react. I don't know if there are any other baseball games that did that, but in any case, it's a real shame because other than that, this game accomplishes a heck of a lot. 6. Bases Loaded. Back to basics with this NES port. Like the ill-fated launch title, this one has few frills, but is just a pick-up and play bat and ball affair. It works just fine. Probably slightly too hard, but you can learn it. Runs at a decent pace. Yeah, Bases Loaded is a fair whack if you just want to get on with an innings or two without fuss. Nothing fancy, but that's not always a bad thing. 5. Frank Thomas Big Hurt Baseball. Between Bo Jackson, Roger Clemens, Frank Thomas, and Ken Griffey Jr., there were plenty of Game Boy games that tried to sell copies based on name value. Two-time MVP Big Hurt can feel quite happy that his name was put onto this one, as our 5th place slot on the list is a very playable and also really good to look at rendition of the old rounders. It's completely laden with stats and batting averages and so on. Not that any of that really matters to the gameplay, but it might be interesting for nerds. Pitching here is really involved, probably the most advanced system on the list. And yeah, the graphics are great, with lots of animation frames accomplished with very little slowdown. The pixel-perfect requirements of your basemen is a little annoying, but just learn not to move them and you'll be fine. Could have done with a bit of tidying up here and there, but largely, this one's great. Oh yeah, and if you're wondering where All-Star Baseball 99 is on this list, well, it's this. It's the same game, re-released with fresh rosters to tie into the N64 release. 4. Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball. We've just mentioned Springfield Isotope's stalwart Ken Griffey Jr. in the previous entry, and his game ever so slightly takes the top prize in the player-associated ones. It's very close, but ultimately the gameplay here is just more consistent and tidier. It's quite simplistic and accessible on the surface, which I appreciate, but if you want to or care about such things, there's a wealth of depth to the stats and so on, and you can even play an entire 162-game season if you wish. That's far too much of any sport for my taste, but then I'm not a sports fan. Possibly the fullest, most complete title of any game on this list, and that's to its credit. 3. Sports Illustrated Championship Football and Baseball. Another combo cart with football and baseball together. Both of them here are way better than they had any right to be. Bo Jackson's lackluster pair showed what can happen when devs have to split their attention across 2 games, and the other, later Sports Illustrated cartridges, which were all dogshit, showed that pulling this off was a feat never to be replicated. The baseball game here has nothing flashy gameplay-wise, but as we've seen, that's not a bad thing necessarily. A lot of the more complex stuff is done automatically, which makes it a damn sight more playable for idiots like me. This feels like a late system game, but it was only 1993. The visuals are a real highlight, with gorgeous rendering, unique character appearances, and a fluidity that retains that all-important feeling of pace. The sound is a bit minimalist, but you don't care too much about that in baseball anyway. 2. Extra bases. A bit of a toss-up between the last two, but ultimately I decided Extra Bases just missed out on the top spot. No reason why exactly, just that the first place one happens to be one of the most obscure titles on this list, and still manages to be one of the best. Extra Bases, especially for how early in the lifespan of the Game Boy it is, really took me by surprise by just how much fun it is. Fielding is intuitive and actually fun, with the depth and perspective actually helping you rather than being an optical illusion of positioning. Really playable, and a password system means you don't have to go through all 13 opponents in one sitting. A simple thing to give as a plus point perhaps, but in the early 90s, these things could not be taken for granted. If you like simple, accessible baseball, this is where it's at. Number 1. Power Pro GB. As I said, these last two are really 1A and 1B. I just put this one first because it's a Japanese exclusive, and being so late on, many players to this day haven't heard of it. Sports games by Konami often have that ability to surprise you though, and here I get a similar vibe as that with International Superstar Soccer, which did very well on the football list I did back in the summer. I adore the batting mechanic here. You get a little crosshatch showing where the pitcher's going to throw, and your ability to move your aim to hit it or not is based on a combination of your own reflexes and also the individual batter's stats. More talented batters will have a bigger hitbox and also a faster movement. It's such a simple thing, but really engrossing. Sure, it's not realistic, but you're sat on your ass playing baseball. You're not exactly running the bases yourself there, Max Grodenchik. One of my favorite sports games of all time, right here. And that's our list. Which out of these were your favorites? Does anyone actually like that dreadful launch title? All of these answers and more can be found in your good old interactive comments section. Let's go ballers.